Hello, kaiju lovers, and hopefully some of the heroes of the internet who, listen to Henshin Men, and hopefully, starting next month on Ultraman Day, Henshin Power V3. I am Nathan Marchand, the host of both of those podcasts, and joining me today is the man who has been spearheading Ultraman's expansion into the Western world, Mr. Jeff Gomez of Ultraman Connection, CEO of Starlight Runner. I almost say Starlight Entertainment, but it's Starlight Runner.
That's right.
Yeah. It's exciting to have you on again. You've been a listener of my podcast for a little while. That's how we connected. I had you on a bonus episode of MIFV as a personal interview, but it was meant as a bit of a tie-in with Shin Ultraman. And, so if anyone wants to, the interview portion has been made available, but if you want to hear the uncut episode where several of my friends, we talk about Shin Ultraman because it was still pretty new at the time.
Sure.
You join MIFV Max on Patreon, you can hear the whole thing. But we're having you on today, as my background is giving away, to talk about Ultraman Rising, the new animated film from Netflix.
Everybody in the world should be talking about Ultraman Rising.
I mean, the hype for it was starting to get pretty real because, I'm trying to remember what was it? It was a Variety. There was an early review, and the early review was touting it as possibly one of the best animated films of the year.
Isn't that wonderful? Who could have guessed?
Yeah, who could have guessed? Yeah. I will admit when I first heard about this, hey, it's we got at least one person here watching with us. We have the Omni viewer himself. He says
Omni.
you could say he got his mojo rising. Yeah, there you go. So I will admit, when I first heard about this, when it was just a teaser image, it was intriguing. And then there was that whole hullabaloo with Netflix's animation department. They were making massive cuts, and people were worried if this was going to affect things like Ultraman Rising or Godzilla Singular Point. It was a lot of concerns at the time.
Sure.
And I had a little bit of faith because, and I'll talk about the cast and crew here in a moment, but I know that the director had worked on Kubo and the Two Strings for Laika, and I loved Kubo and the Two Strings, so that gave me a little bit of hope there. And then the first trailer started coming out, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want this to be a quippy Marvel movie, because I've read interviews with some of the guys over at Supro who are basically saying like, yeah, you think we haven't had offers from Hollywood, but we're very protective of Ultraman because we want him to remain quintessentially Japanese, and all of this sort of stuff, which is why it was a little surprising that this movie existed, because okay. But from what I've read, the Shannon, I believe that is his name,
Shannon Tyndall and John Aoshima, they're co-directing.
Yeah. Apparently, they took a proposal to Supro and made them happy. So it's not like they were doing this without permission or without Supro's involvement, and which gave me some much needed reassurance. And then I thought the second trailer was much better in that regard, and then sat down and watched the movie, and we'll get into that. But I know Ultraman Connection's been really busy with their coverage of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And when did you get to see the movie in full?
I've gotten to see the movie in multiple iterations, but the last time before it ran on Netflix was in February or March, and I got to tell you, remarkable continued improvement in generation to the movie. So the movie everyone saw just a few months ago still had a healthy amount of work that was done to it, which it's nerve-wracking because everything's being done very, very quickly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So just do a quick rundown here. So as I mentioned, this was directed by Shannon Tyndall, who this is his directorial debut. I thought he had directed not Kubo, but no, he was just involved with Kubo. So this is a directorial, and also Mark Hames, as you mentioned. It was produced by Tom Knott and Lisa M. Poole. Yep. And let me see some other.
And co-directed by John Aoshima.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And, as you mentioned, music by Scott Stafford. And I do have a couple of notes on, about him. And this was actually a co-production between Supro and Netflix Animation. And the animation, interestingly, was done by Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, famously the company started by George Lucas. But this is their first full-length animated feature since it was called Strange Magic.
That's right.
I think I want to say that was 2015. I think it was around. That was around there. It was this weird animated movie by George Lucas about sprites.
Worth taking a look at just for the sheer amount of imagination that went into it. The designs were interesting. It was a strange film, but beautiful all the less.
So really quick, our cast, as I'm going to get into a little bit of the origin of this movie, which is kind of interesting. Sure. So our star in this as Kenji Sato / Ultraman, it was voiced by Christopher Sean. And then we have Professor Sato, his dad, or warning to everybody, we're going full tilt spoilers with this.
Okay,
but I love
everyone. There will be spoilers.
There will be spoilers. The movie's not even been out for a week as of this live stream. But I love the fact I love that because his dad, this is what's interesting about this is that Ultraman in this is a legacy hero.
That's right.
Which is kind of interesting. We've not really seen something quite like this. Yeah. Yeah. So Kenji inherited the mantle from his dad, who's now an old professor in this, and had to retire because of an injury. So which plays into the story of the film very well. There's some tension between the two of them.
Right.
But spoiler warning, we find out Dad can still transform by the end of this. And apparently his official designation is Ultra Dad. That's what I've been seeing. I'm like, well, that's funny. It's because Father of Ultra has already been taken. What cracked me up is that I've been calling Father of Ultra Dad as a shorthand.
Sure.
Just like I Mother of Ultra, I call her Ultra Mom. I know their real names are Marie and Ken, but but I like the shorthand. So
sure.
So he was played by Getty Watanabe.
Sure.
And then we have Mina or Emiko Sato, played by Tamlin Tomita. Dr. Anda, our villain, is played by Keone Young.
Yes.
Ami Wakita was played by Julia Harriman. And those are all of our major characters. There's a handful there's a handful of minor characters after that, but those are our major stars in this. So have you had any interaction with the cast at all for this film?
A little bit. I know a few of them follow me on Twitter, which is wonderful, or X, I think they call it now.
Yes.
And
X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thanks, Danny.
The beauty is that that they're all fans, particularly our lead. And so it's just great to have them be so participative in every aspect of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So what's interesting about this movie, when I started doing some digging, and I had heard that this had originally started as an original project, and for some fans that can be a little bit of an alarm, because you start thinking it's like, oh, you were gonna do something completely original, but then you just slap some Ultraman paint on it, to get it made or whatever. Because we've seen that be attempted and fail miserably far too many times. But from what I was able to gather, first off, is it Tyndall, right? Tyndall?
Yeah.
Tyndall is a fan of Ultraman, and it sounds like he was initially making an original project because he didn't have the license.
Well, it's sort of inspired by this notion of Japanese superheroes and giant heroes at that. There are many besides Ultraman, so that's almost like a subgenre of tokusatsu.
Yeah, Kyodai heroes.
That's right. Very good. But just speaking from personal experience, the notion that someone approaches a project like this with a previously established narrative is something that I personally identify with. I've worked on a few projects in my career that were inspired by, initially created by myself, my own concoctions. I had a story called Planet D, which became Turok Dinosaur Hunter for the Nintendo 64. I helped to develop that narrative, that storyline. I had a game that I created called Global Run, and that became Hot Wheels World Race. So and even Magic the Gathering, I worked on developing the world of Magic the Gathering and the comic books and video games that emerged out of my D&D campaign.
Yeah.
So the fact that Shannon had this kind of original concept, which was in itself rather different from Ultraman, and he adapted to it lovingly and with great appreciation, is there's a great precedent for that sort of thing, and more power to him.
Yeah, his working version of this was called Made in Japan, and the log line that I found for in a couple of different spots was a billionaire forced to grow up when he takes on the orphan children of his former foe. So it was
do your homework.
Yeah, you've listened to my shows. I always do my homework.
My gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not well known.
Yeah. So he was working on this when he was previously working on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends in the mid 2000s. This is an idea he's been sitting on for a while.
Sure.
And then he pitched it to Sony Animation for a couple of years between 2016 and 2018. And that's when it was under the Made in Japan title. That they weren't biting, so he took it to Netflix and got their interest. And then it was actually them who said that his fellow Sony Animation director Peter Ramsey said, why don't you repurpose this into Ultraman? Because apparently the initial version of this, where the hero was called Gamma Man, he was a pastiche. He was an homage character to Tokusatsu, because this guy loves Tokusatsu. And in the very early stages, he was closer to a Super Sentai than he was Ultraman. And then as he started developing it, he morphed, no pun intended, into more of an Ultraman style character, and that's when he also finalized the design for Emmy, or the baby kaiju, in this. And then when he got the suggestion to when he pitched it to Netflix to actually make it an official Ultraman piece, that's when he went to Supro and pitched it to them. And I think that for what one source I looked at said what really impressed them and made them want to give their blessing to the project was he showed them a piece of concept art that it's not the one on the background here, but it's a common promotional image that is of Ultraman cradling newborn baby Emmy in his hands. And they're like, okay, you get it, because Ultraman's a compassionate hero. So that's what sold them on it. And then they've been working on it for the last, since then. That was about 2018, 2019, I think. And then, I think it was officially announced in 2021, if I remember correctly. That's when you just had the teaser image. And then there's, they've trickled some things out slowly since then.
Sure.
So let me see. What else do I have here that would be interesting? Oh, it did. The movie was premiered actually at the Grauman's Egyptian Theater in LA. It was a test screening, April 16th. That's pretty exciting. And this also, I'm guessing, because there was some confidence that they could get some attention for awards. It has gotten, I don't know if it's going on anymore now, but I know last week it was getting a limited theatrical run actually in about 15 cities, if I remember correctly.
That's right, and a few worldwide. So yes, of course, the critical response and the support that the picture has gotten in Hollywood, I think, does make it a candidate for best animated feature in the Oscars and many other awards.
For sure. Oh, you're getting some notifications there.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll do it live. But from what I was looking at, it sounds like, there was a lot of attention to detail put onto this. They brought on cultural advisors to make sure they got the Japanese cultural stuff correct. They went with with making Kenji a baseball player because of things like Moneyball, the movie Moneyball, from what I read, and a manga called Star of the Giants, which focused on the Yomiuri Giants, which I have to say, I love the irony, kind of I guess not dramatic, but the irony of making Kenji, who's a Kyodai hero, a giant hero, his baseball team is the Giants. Clever guys, clever. Nice work there. So let me see. Oh, Del Toro, actually, who's a fan of Ultraman, attended a screening and actually gave them suggestions, and they implemented them.
That's right.
Most notably, that he said there should be a prologue that explains what Ultraman is.
I'm thrilled about that, by the way, because I had felt that the picture needed it, and that description is one of the best that I've seen publicly and in canon, describing who Ultraman is.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I just want to say, Del Toro is one of the few American directors I would trust with a kaiju property if they wanted to do a Hollywood version. Because not only is he a fan, he's proven that he can do it. I mean, just look at Pacific Rim.
Sure.
And you'll see what he could. So I would trust him with Ultraman. I want him to direct a MonsterVerse film so bad, but the man is working on 1,000 things at the same time, so it will probably never happen. But, a fan can dream. Interestingly, and this was an observation that I made while watching this, one thing that is a bit of a departure, and there's a handful of departures in terms of what we typically see with Ultraman in this, which is kind of funny. I saw a meme from which one? There's I can't remember the name of it now. Not Mazer Patrol. There's an Ultraman podcast, and they did a little meme about there. Maybe it was Mazer Patrol. I don't know. It was another Tokusatsu podcast. They made a meme where they were outlining some of the nitpicky complaints I guess some people have had about this movie. Like, Ultraman's eye shouldn't be blue. Ultraman should have a science patrol team and blah, 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 all this. And then it says, and at the bottom, it has a crying Jeed. It's like, guys, this is not as unheard of as you think. Okay.
Of course.
But
almost all of the so-called unusual tropes have precedence in some aspect of the franchise.
Right. I mean,
thousands of episodes. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. And also, people complaining about his eyes being blue. I think that's just an American Ultraman thing. Watch Ultimate Hero, the American produced live action show from the early 90s. Ultraman's eyes are blue. Ultraman Powered's eyes are blue. And that was the first time that they had a blue-eyed Ultraman. But the main thing that I wanted to bring this up, because this was a challenge that the animators said that they had to run into, because Ultraman's face is a complete mask. So they were trying to figure out, how do we get him to emote? And it's a little different when it's Tokusatsu, because you have these very talented suit actors who are very good at emoting with their body language.
Sure.
And so, but they wanted something a little bit, this is animation. It needs to be a little more visual, a little more dynamic. And they wanted to take advantage of the medium. So that's why you'll notice there are these very subtle irises in his eyes. And that was something I picked up on very quickly. And they did that specifically to make his emoting clearer.
Sure.
And after a while, I wasn't bothered by it, because, like I said, it's very subtle. It's almost like there's these little lights in the back of, back of his eyes, and they just kind of move around. So I wasn't bothered by it.
No. For the medium, it's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, and also apparently his reflective skin was kind of challenging because they're trying because they're trying to make shadows to go along with it. So apparently animating Ultraman was fairly difficult. And they were really trying to get that. They spent a lot of time trying to pin down the art style. They wanted this balance between hyper stylized and realistic. And I think they landed in a good spot there.
No, really
I have heard a few people joke that Ultraman is shaped like a Dorito, but he's got really wide shoulders and he gets really skinny going down to his waist, and he's really lanky too. I mean, if you thought Shin Ultraman was lanky, watch Kenji in this, and oh my gosh, he's very spindly.
Yeah.
So I mentioned
strength. There's strength in his legs. He conveys power, even though he is rather lean.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And some other. So we're talking about Scott Stafford, who composed for this. He previously worked with Tyndall, doing music for a previous Netflix project they had done. It was a miniseries called Lost Ollie. There's even an Easter egg for Lost Ollie in this because it's the little stuffed bear, not bear, but the rabbit that we see in this that is offered to Emmy.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. But he actually went in and he made a soundtrack using a lot of orchestral music. He also used taiko drums, chip tunes from the 70s and 80s video game consoles, and it said that he used this just made me laugh. He used a modified NES and Commodore 64 synthesizer to make the sound he wanted. I like that. I love it. I love it. and Ultraman Rising, they went through a couple of titles before they landed on that. They were going to call Ultraman Made in Japan, as going back to the the non-Ultraman version of the title. Then they thought about going with Ultraman Legacy, but then like, that's an overused title, and now DC's making Superman Legacy, so maybe not. But I think Ultraman Rising is kind of perfect because Rising, the Ultraman Rise, the Henshin sequence, that is closely associated with Ultraman, and I do think it fits in thematically with what we have going on in here.
100%.
So I think they honestly went with the best title, even though admittedly Rise has become a little bit of an overused word in titles as well. You have like Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Rise of the Machines.
Speculate that's how he'll be referred to when it comes to the canonical multiverse of Ultraman, that he'll be known as Ultraman Rising.
Ultraman Rising. Well, that will be interesting. I would love to see Supro attempt to make a live action suit of this thing. I mean, they've done that with several of the other animated Ultraman, the Netflix anime series. They made live action suits for those, and they look really good. The one that really surprised me is they made one for, his name is escaping me, the original anime Ultraman.
Yes. All of the anime Ultraman have live action suits for stage performance.
Yeah, and they've also used them in is it Ultra Galaxy? No, not Ultra Galaxy. Those webisodes that they did on YouTube. I'm trying to because you guys premiered the third one, the feature length version. Right. I'm trying to remember what it's called, Ultraman Galaxy or Ultra Fight Galaxy or something.
Not the production IG suits.
No, not those, but the ones from Ultraman: The Adventure Begins and the original.
Yeah,
his name is escaping me.
They are canonical Ultras. They're a part of the Ultraman universe. Yes, there is an Emmy and a Gigantron suit. So those appear live.
I need to find pictures of those, as I really
they're floating around on Twitter. They're great.
Yeah, Gigantron. I don't know if this makes me a fool or a special kind of nerd, but when I saw that name written out, my brain read it as Gigantron. I was like, wait, Gigan's in this? It is like Full Tilt Robot now. I'm confused. And then it's Gigantron is this big dragon looking thing. It also threw me off because when I hear Tron attached to a name, I immediately think it's a robot, which we kind of get at the end of this, but yeah, so I don't know. I don't know about that one, but like I said, there's a lot of Easter eggs in this, but from what I read, there are drawings in Ami's living room that reference the Kramer family apartment and Kramer versus Kramer. That's an Easter egg I haven't heard anybody talk about, because apparently Kramer versus Kramer was part of the inspiration for this. And I'm like, okay, apparently I need to watch Kramer versus Kramer.
You should.
Yeah.
The boy in Kramer versus Kramer is a friend of mine. His name is Justin Henry. He grew up and he's in the movie business.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then, so actually, one of the inspirations for this movie's art style, as much as this might blow some people's minds, was actually Katsuhiro Otomo, his lines and tones. And this guy famously is the creator of Akira.
That's right.
So I'm like, wait, Akira? From Akira to Ultraman. Wow. That is just wild to me.
I also think there's a touch of Max Fleischer, the animator who first animated Superman.
And Popeye as well. Right. Yep. Yeah, but Superman is what he's really well known for.
There you go.
So that's, those were my research notes on this to kind of, to help put this into perspective. So I think we should just talk about the movie itself at this point. So you got to see this whole thing kind of develop as it went. Sure.
As someone who, kind of acts as a liaison to Subaraya and as a transmedia producer, everything connected with Ultraman that happens here in the States is something that kind of crosses through my inbox, and I write notes and share my thoughts on it. I know the franchise pretty well. I grew up with it, and I've worked hard to study what it means and why Ultraman is the way Ultraman is, and so forth. So, in a way, I'm helping to kind of defend and protect the essence of the Ultraman brand. And so, yeah, I wrote lots of notes all the way through the process.
Mm-hmm. Were you acting as something of a consultant on it, or were you just keeping track of it?
The term is transmedia producer. So I act as a producer. I'm a member of the Producers Guild of America. That's someone who understands all of the facets that go into the production of content, whether it's a movie, an animated series, a YouTube video, a comic book. I happen to specialize in all of them because my career has been quite varied. And so understanding the animation process allowed me to help, the various people like the licensees and the merchandisers and the licensing company in Los Angeles to kind of understand how the storyline was evolving and what's going to be commercial, what should be a toy, what can be a poster or a stuffed animal or things like that. All of that along the way. But also, what is Ultraman and what is going to happen that may not be, Ultraman oriented. If you think back on all the history of Ultraman, I don't think there has ever been, or it's extremely rare, for example, that Ultraman directly fights human beings.
Right. That rare. I'm almost done with the Heisei era on my personal Ultraman journey. I've seen a bit of New Generation Heroes, but I haven't watched it all the way through. Although I've been watching, I've been religiously watching all the new stuff since Ultraman Z. So that's the part of the New Gen Heroes that I've seen. But yeah, it rarely, if ever, happens, and I can't think of any significant moments where it has, but I've seen so much of it now, it all kind of blends together.
So when you think about the antagonists in this movie, you know, that's the equivalent of the Science Patrol, the attack team, and you have this antagonistic relationship between the attack team and Ultraman. So that is you have to tread very carefully if you're going to observe not just the canon, but the essence of who Ultraman is. And I thought that Shannon and John handled it really well. It was a delicate dance, right? Think about it. There are many opportunities for Ultraman to be in direct conflict with humans, and they really thread the needle carefully.
Well, and it's especially interesting because they don't really explain the origin of Ultraman in this. He is just something that exists in the world already. We know it was Kenji's dad who was the first Ultraman. I don't know if he's a host. I don't know if he's an alien in human form or any, like the usual Ultraman stuff. Some would argue that isn't necessarily important. It's just, Ultraman. If you know who Ultraman is, you can just go along with it. I will admit, yes, as a fan, I understand who Ultraman is, although I would have liked to have known, what exactly are we dealing with in this particular universe?
Let me talk to you, Nathan, about some of the logic here, because I actually appreciate what the team did on the movie. They understood that in order to make one interested in lore, you have to first fall in love with the characters. And that is a boon to the franchise, because you know what's happening right now? Everyone's running out to find out more about Ultraman. What that does is it brings new members to Ultraman Connection. It brings new subscribers to the official Ultraman channel so that they can watch. Old Ultraman fans are recommending which series for new fans to.
Yeah, in fact, Ultraman Connection did an entire article. It was like, hey, you saw Ultraman Rising? Here's where you can go next.
What are you going to do, right? So,
right.
And then there's the Mill Creek DVDs, which are all available, and that's almost the entire canon of Ultraman that young people can run out and buy to learn more about Ultraman. And then, of course, there's that little stinger at the end of the movie.
Yes, which when I was watching this with my brother over the weekend, I told him, I was like, okay, Marvel has ruined me with this. We're gonna wait to see if there's anything before the credits, especially since Netflix didn't start doing its recommendation thing like it normally does when the credits for it starts. Like, nope, we have to wait. And then, yes, we do get the stinger. I did call that to a certain extent. I was, because the setup for this is we have Kenji, who has inherited the mantle, but he's trying to be a baseball star. That's that's his real passion, and he feels like he just got dragged into all the superhero stuff because his dad got hurt, and then the mantle passed to him. And now, when he was a kid, he loved Ultraman.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember if in that, because this prologue scene, this flashback when he's a little kid, and then there's him and his parents are watching baseball, and it's this nice, wholesome family moment. And then there's a kaiju attack right outside their window. And then dad says, I have to go deal with this. And then they find out, or at least little Kenji finds out, oh my gosh, dad is Ultraman, and I didn't know. And then it goes from there, because then unhappy things start happening. And right. And then mom disappears. I thought at first that before they established that she disappeared, I thought she was dead. I thought she had died in the intervening years or something like that. And that's created a rift between Kenji and his dad, Professor Sato.
Yeah.
But they kept saying disappear. And I'm like, mom's going to show up. Like my prediction was that they would get to Kaiju Island, and that's where mom is.
Oh,
that would be like one of the big plot twists toward the end of the movie. No, that doesn't happen. Then we get the stinger, and it's like, oh, come help me. I'm at Nebula M78. And then the movie ends. I'm like, what? It's like, I called it, but what? And I know from what I read that the Tyndall does have ideas for 2 sequels, which is kind of exciting.
Sure.
So I'm anticipating that
Now,
we're probably going to go to the Land of Light in the
if
in
you're
the next movie.
an Ultraman fan, think about how often that's happened where a human being was anywhere near the Land of Light, the home world of the Ultras. Very, very rare does that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
This would be a special exception, and obviously we'd learn so much more about this version of the Ultraman universe.
For sure. And the main crux of this is Kenji is out doing a superhero thing. He fights a monster, Gigantron, and defeats Gigantron, but then Gigantron gets killed by the KDF, the Kaiju Defense Force, who act as our antagonists. And you find out the reason they were chasing her is she had an egg, and they want the egg because the egg will lead them to Kaiju Island, because they can't find Kaiju Island. It's like, it's like Skull Island. It's got this perpetual storm and nobody can see it, or whatever. It's a trope that might seem a little out of date now because our technology is so advanced. We've got the whole world mapped out, but but I kind of miss when we didn't have the entire map filled in. Sure. There's still a little bit of mystery left in the world, but regardless. So that's why they're after them. So he ends up basically adopting this little kaiju. And when I first heard about that concept, I thought, well, that's different. And then about a year or so ago, I finally got around to watching Ultraman 80. I'm like, oh, they've done this before.
Of course. And that's on Ultraman Connection. We actually talk about the precedent for baby kaiju.
Yeah. And there's been other baby kaiju on the show before, in the franchise before. There have been some episodes of different shows where the monster is going on a rampage trying to protect its young. I think I know they've done that with, I think Ultraman Z did that with Red King. Red King. So they've played around with that idea, but the concept, and that makes the monster sympathetic, but the concept of Ultraman becoming the surrogate parent, that was done in 80.
There you go. That's right.
So,
very good.
So like I said, there's precedent for it, but this goes even deeper than what 80 did. Because, well, for one thing, it's a movie, so it's got the time to do it. And but this one really becomes, if you're a parent, you're looking at this and you're like, yeah, this is what it's like. Because all the usual things that parents have to deal with children happens in this. And the main thing that one of the main things we see with Kenji is when he starts, he's kind of charmingly arrogant, I guess you could say. A little bit of a Tony Stark thing, but he isn't the most likable character at first. Then it's taking care of Emmy. That's what he ends up naming the baby kaiju. Taking care of her forces him to become a better person, which is generally what parenthood does to you.
Yes. And there are precedents even for an ultra host who is not the most nice kind of guy, right? And that's interesting to me, how the fans kind of like that about Ken Sato, the fact that he starts out kind of a douche, and evolves, in such a way that makes us fall in love with him as we're obviously in love with Emmy.
Oh my gosh. And they work so hard to make Emmy appealing in this. Like, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, like, Supro's looking at this and go like, man, we can market this so hard, Emmy.
She could have easily not been, right? For example, she cries a lot.
She does.
And had they not handled that as delicately as they did, it could have been, kind of grating especially for parents who have to listen to the thing over and over and over again because their kids are watching Ultraman Rising day and night. I call it the Barney effect. You listen to that song once and you're like, all right, whatever. Listen to it 42,000 times and you can go out of your mind. So, so the handling of Emmy I thought was really interesting because they figure out a number of different ways for her to be a pain in the butt for Ken, but not a pain in the butt for parents who are, walking around the house while their kids are watching the movie.
I think it's largely because they understand what it's like. I'm not a parent myself, but I am the oldest of four, so I have a little bit of kind of vicarious experience with this. So I understand what the struggles that go along with it. And yeah, you're right. It would have been easy to make Emmy annoying, but I think the filmmakers were able to, they found the right spot where they can be like, well, this would be realistic, that she's gonna, quote unquote, need a diaper change or she needs to be fed and she's going to be demanding to be fed because that's what even baby animals, that's what they do. They demand to be fed. And then the mother has to go find something to come back and feed the offspring. So, that all makes sense. And, there's even a little bit of growth physically and otherwise, even for Emmy in this, because she does grow up a little bit. She cocoons, and I thought she was going to come out looking like a miniature version of Mom, but she didn't quite do that. She just grew wings. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. We're not going to throw away the cuteness quite yet. We need to hold on to the cuteness because that's.
but again, I found it interesting, and maybe there's a touch of Grogu in all of this. In that they could have gone over cute. And they didn't. In Shannon patterning Emmy after his own infant daughter, there are just natural. She's a person rather than an objectified cuteness. There's personality in her facial expressions and her body language and so forth that isn't just designed to be cute, but designed to be, I don't know, kind of human. Like there's personhood within her that I think actually benefits that character and makes us fall even more in love with her as a something that can be genuinely loved. And that's where I think the memes and all of this and overwhelming adoration for the movie is coming from. That relationship feels really authentic.
Oh, it most certainly does. And I think another reason why it's resonating with people is because this is ultimately a movie that is about family. And what I find most interesting in this is that we have kind of both versions of what family can look like. We have the biological family with Professor Sato and Kenji, and to a lesser extent, the mom in this, even though she's not in most of the movie, but they're a more traditional biological family. But then we have this, for lack of a better term, the found family with Kenji and Emmy, which is something that I can't take credit for this observation. This goes to my friend Daniel DiManna, who runs the Godzilla Novelization project. He pointed out it's interesting to see how we've had 3 major kaiju/tokusatsu releases in the last year, -1, Godzilla Cross Kong, and now this, and they all deal with very similar ideas of the found family.
Yes.
Where -1 is about 3 people who survived World War II coming together, and none of them are related to each other, a man, a woman, and a baby. In GXK, it's Suko and Kong. And now here we have this relationship, and and it's not just with the tokusatsu releases. That's been a theme in a lot of blockbusters the last few years, and I think that's something that it speaks to something that people are looking for. Either they want the family that they never had, even if they have to make it, so to speak. They have to find another family because the family they have, didn't work out and one form or another. And I think that's where a lot of it's coming from. I also, maybe you could tell me if this was done on purpose or not.
Mhm.
Once I realized, I think like a day or two before the movie released on Netflix, I'm like, wait a second, we're putting this out right before Father's Day, and the movie's about dads. I see what you did there. So, was that planned, or was that just a happy accident?
No, planned. Listen, if some of your audience who knows my work knows that I am a advocate for something called collective journey storytelling. The standard hero's journey cycle tends to be highly oppositional. You get called to adventure. You must battle the villain. You conquer your opponent, grab the treasure, and come home and present it to your community. Mm-hmm. That's obviously highly simplified, but we're in such a polarized society where if we disagree with someone online, we want them dead. Mm-hmm. Where our neighbors are flying a flag that's different from our own, and suddenly mm-hmm. we hate each other, and mm-hmm. all that sort of thing. And it's exhausting, Nathan. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting. So I find it interesting that particularly from the Japanese sensibility, that we're getting this thing that says, you know what? It's okay to acknowledge each other's perspectives. We have some differences, but here is how to transcend them. Mm. I'm going to show you a story of reconciliation. So it's not just about found family. It's not just about a family defending itself. It's about a family that's a little bit broken apart.
Yes.
That needs to come together mm-hmm. in order to triumph. And that's beautiful. That's the story of the future for us. We need mm-hmm. to understand exactly how to do that. It's almost as if we've kind of forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
And Ultraman Rising serves that purpose. And I'm really proud of the fact that it does.
Oh, that's one of the things that resonated for me, was how wonderfully not just pro-family that this movie was, but also how profoundly pro-fatherhood that it is. Because you have Kenji and Professor Sato who reconcile. They work out their differences. Their differences are very understandable, and you find Kenji basically the origin of Kenji's issues. I mean, there's even a scene where Ami, the reporter lady, you got Ami and Emmy, that gets slightly confusing a little mm-hmm. bit here and there, but she lays it out. But, and some would say like, that's this very obvious expositional scene, but I'm also sitting here and thinking, it's like, yeah, but that makes sense for a reporter to kind of go into, and just point all these things out, because that's what reporters do.
Absolutely.
And so she lays it all out, and then you're like, yeah, he's got issues because he had a falling out with his dad, and he feels like everybody else, including his dad, is trying to run his life. Oh, you have to be Ultraman. But I just want to be a baseball player, Dad. No, you have to be Ultraman.
Right.
And then Emmy shows up, and Emmy is wrecking everything. He suddenly has a kid, and it's like, this kid's wrecking my life. Emmy's trying to run my life. Now I got to take care of her. And
remember who kind of models things for him? It's Ami and her motherhood and her relationship mm-hmm. With the girl, and the fact that she has a mother who has nurtured her. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm talking about this kind of collective notion. Everyone is contributing. The other father figure is the coach. Mm-hmm. The dark father figure is Onda. The villain is a parent and has been torn from his child because of kaiju. That's something we can all empathize with.
Oh, for sure. And that was actually kind of interesting. I wish we had actually gotten more of Dr. Onda, because when we first see him, he seems like an interesting but very straightforward sort of not super villain, but very straightforward kind of a villain. And then halfway through the movie, we get this backstory for him that adds some depth and makes him more sympathetic. And I'm like, couldn't we have led with that a little bit sooner? I would have. That sounded really interesting. It's very Gamera 3 in a lot of ways, which is what it makes him interesting and actually makes his end kind of tragic.
Yes.
To be honest, because he is so consumed by his lust for it's not just zeal for, protecting humans from kaiju, and they cause destruction and we must eliminate them. That's what he says, but then we find out it's very personal for him because he's a victim in one of those kaiju attacks, and it's pushed him to the point where by the end of the movie, after this big epic action sequence, when it turns into Pacific Rim for about 10 minutes, with his ridiculous mech, he blows himself up.
That's right.
To take out everybody else because he hates Ultraman for sympathy, for protecting the kaiju in some form or another, and he hates the kaiju because he just hates all kaiju, and and I'm guessing for him personally, he just doesn't feel like he has all that much to live for at this point because his family's gone.
Do note that he acknowledges Ultraman as an ally for most of the movie because Ultraman has fought off kaiju and destroyed kaiju for many years. So he has opportunities to fire upon Ultraman, like on the tower and so forth, and he doesn't.
Yeah, Tokyo Tower, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I almost called you James. Sorry, I was combining Jeff and Gomez. Sorry, but Jeff, I think this is the first time Ultraman has ever, as far as I know, visited Tokyo Tower.
As I understand it, Tokyo Tower, at a certain point in time, the government of Japan asked studios to stop destroying the tower. So and if you notice in recent years, that doesn't happen too often. So this was kind of almost an exception, and the tower survives.
Yes,
the story.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting because I do think the last time I saw the Tokyo Tower get wrecked in a kaiju movie, I think was Gamera Guardian of the Universe. That's the most recent one I can think of. But
a while back.
Yeah. I'm just surprised that even before then they never, because the Tokyo Tower was such a popular spot for kaiju that Ultraman was never there, So we have a scene where he's climbing it, which is an interesting image to get to Emmy, who's gone on a little bit of a rampage. That's the interesting thing about the middle of this movie is it starts off very traditional Ultraman with kaiju fights and superhero action and all of that. And then we, at the end, and I do want to talk a little about the ending because the ending was very satisfying. We get a big action finale at the end of this movie, but the middle of it is almost more like, almost more like a Pixar movie where it's more about family drama, but with a kaiju. There's not as much superhero stuff going on.
No, there are actually only a handful of big action set pieces in the whole movie, and the fact that it can hold one's attention and hold a kid's attention, I think, is a merit to the picture.
Yeah, but what were you saying about when we got on the tangent about Tokyo Tower?
Just in terms of wholesale destruction. As opposed to some of the other American interpretations of kaiju, which are obsessed with wide-scale destruction and mayhem and so forth. This movie actually shows you how much Ultraman cares about not destroying everything in his path. In pursuit of the monster and in diminishing the monster's capability to do exactly that.
For sure.
So that's that to me is really interesting, and to be able to do that and still make the story interesting, engaging is a triumph, I thought, for the film.
I do think and I think I read an article on Ultraman Connection that brought this up. That trying to find the line. There's a line between Professor Sato and Kenji that brings up. You might remember. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but when he was talking about, it was like, this is what it means to be Ultraman. And I'm rummaging through my notes. We'll do it live. He says being Ultraman isn't about fighting, it's about heart.
That's right.
And I do think that is something that does get a little bit lost with some people, not just with Ultraman, but just with heroes in general. I think that's something that people miss with, to use an American example, miss with Superman. Superman is not just a big, strong guy in primary colors who can hit things really hard or fly around and do cool things. He's meant to be an inspirational figure. He's a compassionate figure. And, there's a scene that often gets brought up when talking about this. I think it's from All-Star Superman, if I remember correctly, where Superman is flying around and he finds this punk girl who's standing on the edge of a building thinking about jumping. And he just flies right up to her. And there's not even a dialogue exchange. He just looks at her and she just jumps into his arms and they hug. And, visually communicating that because she has seen Superman, she has decided not to go through with her suicide. Right. And I do think that's something that gets lost in for a lot of writers because they're so focused on, I guess, either the aesthetics of it or the surface level cool stuff, or in some cases in their minds the overpoweredness of Superman, that they lose sight of the deeper things that make Superman resonate.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's, to me, symbolically, when Ultraman shows up and the kaiju's there, 99% of the time, unless there is imminent threat of death right then and there, Ultraman pauses for a minute. That kind of Sergio Leone, standoff, and to me that symbolizes Ultraman's desire for the animal, for the kaiju, to leave, to get out, to stand down. The vast majority of the time it doesn't. And so forth. But there is a hope for a peaceable outcome. The suggestion that it doesn't have to be a fight to the death, even though quite usually it is. And I like that about it. And there was, that kind of was resonated through Ultraman Rising.
Because when we'll talk about the end here, we get to the ending and we get this big plot twist, which I was kind of thinking was coming, although it didn't happen exactly how I thought it would, because we find out Gigantron is not dead. Now, I thought what had happened was Gigantron had been her body had been taken by the KDF and then turned into a cyborg. So we have I think the official name is Mecha Gigantron, if I remember correctly. And so I thought, oh, okay. So Gigantron's corpse got turned into a cyborg. That makes sense. And then I'm like, well, that's going to present some complications because suddenly Emmy's like, it's my real mom, but real mom ain't so nice. So, but then we find out, oh, wait, that's not a robot. That's a revived Gigantron with armor, which, now that I think about it, makes me think of Armored Darkness from Ultraman Mebius, and when Armored Darkness has come back a few times since then, it's always somebody else wearing the armor,
right?
And so they're playing with that concept. So the villain, an important character or usually a villain will be wearing that armor, and it's very corruptive. So we find out about that, and now Ultraman's like, I don't want to kill this thing now. If it was just a robot, I would have decimated it, but now I don't want to do that. And and so they're trying to manage that, but then Dr. Onda gets his Pacific Rim mech, and then we go full tilt. Then we have this wonderful moment where Ultra Dad shows up, which that surprised me. I was not expecting that. I didn't know he could still transform or anything, so that was really exciting. And I think for me, because it was cool aesthetically, it was cool thematically, and it was the moment, and this is something I have never seen in the franchise before, so I have to give them credit for coming up with something new, was the father-son specium beam. to finish off the mech, and I'm like, okay, Rising, you got me. You got me. Where Ken puts his hand up, and then Dad comes over and puts his hand there, and that completes the Specium beam. And I'm like, okay, it's unique and it's very fitting for this movie. And then you had Gigantron and Emmy blasting their breath attacks at the mech, so it becomes this big team effort to finish the thing. That mech was wrecking all of them.
That's right. Very Japanese, very collective journey. All those things merged at that.
Yes, they did. And I will admit, I'm a little bit of a sucker for moments like that, where you have these team finishes like that, with all their different abilities. But like I said, the father-son combo was the part that that I thought was particularly unique. It was awesome about that. Yeah. And then we had, and then Emmy, we don't get to spend a lot of time on Kaiju Island, but we do see it at the end. They take them there, where we can presume that Gigantron and Emmy will live happily ever after. I have no idea if they will be in the sequel. I would be curious to see what a sequel to this would look like, if they would want to try to get Emmy back, because they think like, oh, Emmy's too good to not have anymore. But I'm like, can you make that pony do that trick again? That sort of a thing. Or would Emmy be a distraction from what seems to be where they're going, which is into space to go to Nebula M78?
That's right.
So,
cool. And then we get the Diplo song, which I don't know if you've heard the actual lyrics. Ultraman's got a plan. He will save us in the end once again, or we're dead. Ultraman, where you at? Ultraman, without you, we'd never last, but you always have our back. That's and it's catchy, and it's Diplo, which meant that it's worldwide, which I thought was a nice investment as far as Netflix is concerned.
We just got a comment in the chat here from Evan Gonzalez. He says, "Love that song." It's not my favorite Ultraman theme, but I did enjoy it. Yeah. I'm an old man. I'm kind of basic. I love Take Me Higher. That's, for me, that is peak Ultraman theme. But I know that that's the easiest one to pick. The original theme or the Ultra 7 theme. Those are the easiest ones to pick.
Same here. Absolutely. That's got a banging theme. I do have to run. Any last thoughts, Nathan?
No, I'm just grateful to have you on here to discuss the movie and have some insights into this. I think I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer to take some comments from the chat, maybe give a few other notes. Oh, do it. We're all about shameless self-promotion around here.
So anyone watching this, you are absolutely welcome to join Ultraman Connection. There is a kind of subscriber button on there that will get you the newsletter. On Ultraman Connection, there is a link to Amazon, which now has a massive Ultraman store. All the Ultraman Rising toys come out first week of July, and then there'll be many other Ultraman products in that Amazon store from our various licensees. Don't forget Ultraman Arc, which is new and coming. Again, they're early in July. And what's cool about Ultraman Arc is that there are some tonal and thematic similarities to Ultraman Rising. So you're going to be able to have you bring along the kids who liked Ultraman Rising, and they'll enjoy Arc. And then this coming summer, there are lots of plans. So watch Ultraman Connection and follow the Ultraman Connection X a social media platform thing, and follow me at Jeff_Gomez on X Twitter. So that you get all the news.
It's a good time to be an Ultraman fan, because
it really is.
Taiga's getting released on Blu-ray next
So
month.
awesome. So
yeah, which I'm looking at that thinking it's like second wave of releases. Thank you, Mill Creek. That's what I'm hoping anyway. We only have Taiga announced, but I'm hoping that means we're getting more.
maybe more.
Oh,
Maybe more.
excellent. I'm excited. I'm excited. I have bought basically everything Mill Creek has put out. My shelf
You
is
are a
full of it.
supporter. Thank you.
It's full of it. And Seismic, you talk about the licensees for this. Seismic Toys is going to make a Gigantron figure.
Gigantron. I'm so thrilled. I was present at that negotiation, and it was actually rather short notice. And Seismic is moving at the speed of light. I'm so thrilled.
Yep, I'm friends with Alex Rushdie, who runs it, and you know he's good people. So you know that's going to be really exciting. You know, they've done some other Ultraman stuff in the past. Last I heard, this was like I think over a year ago, though. I think they announced they were going to do a Tiga figure, and I'm like, I want my Tiga figure.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon. Because now we got to get this. But it's a great time to be an Ultraman fan, and I do hope that Rising becomes yet another gateway for people, as you were talking about, to learn more about this.
Well, it already has been. It already has been, and that's absolutely thrilling for me.
Yeah, because we need more heroes like Ultraman in the world. Yes, we do. Thank you again, Jeff, for joining us.
And thanks to the audience. Jump on my socials, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. See you, Jeff. All righty, everybody. So as much as I would love to have kept Jeff on there, he's a busy man. I do have a few other notes that I am going to, just go over here, because I didn't quite get to everything I wanted to talk about, but I mentioned one of the lines, being Ultraman is about fighting, it's about heart. I did jot down a few other lines that I particularly appreciated, which there was an exchange between Kenji and his coach early on, where the coach says it takes more than attitude to become a giant, and that alone, I'm like, oh, okay, that's I like that, especially with Ultraman being a giant. But then Kenji replies by saying, I stopped believing in giants a long time ago, and I think that's incredibly telling. Oh, yeah, here's a little message from Jeff here. He says, thanks, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you, Jeff, for taking time out of your day to be here. So I thought that was a very telling line right there. It's very clever scripting, and we could stand to use some more clever scripting around here. One other thing, and I didn't get into this with Jeff, but I thought it was interesting. It's a variation on an Ultraman trope. Is we do have color timers in this, but it's not limited to 3 minutes. It's not a time limit. It's almost, I kind of in my mind of like, is this a mood ring? Is that what this is? That's what it ends up kind of being, because the color timer is connected to Ultraman's stress level, and the more stressed he gets, the quicker it gets to flashing. And then obviously if it flashes for too long, then he reverts back to human form. I just thought was kind of interesting, connecting it to stress levels, because it was possible in one point in the movie where he actually stopped the color timer by calming himself down. And, it also fits in with Kenji's stress over keeping Emmy safe throughout the film. So I thought that was an interesting variation on the idea, like I said. Let me see. We don't have a transformation device in this. I don't know. That's not something I've heard a lot of people talk about, but I thought that was interesting. And there is precedent for this. If you watch Return of Ultraman with Ultraman Jack, is Hideki Go in that. Doesn't have a transformation device. He just wills the transformation. So we have that on there. Like I said, it's interesting how a lot of what we see in this movie is just incredibly uncommon tropes that have been in the franchise. It's just that there's a popular perception of Ultraman, which is, there are these certain tropes that it adheres to. And a lot of what this movie does is playing off of stuff that was where it went against the grain a little bit. It's just now it's basically a collection of those. So no transformation device. Let me see. There's references to Siri. We didn't talk about Mina. Mina was the little personal assistant, little robot. When there's an emotional moment where Mina gets taken out, which surprised me a little bit because I thought we were going to get Mina back, or that Mina would survive in some form or another. And there's jokes about her being like Siri and all of that, which I mean, is that a little too much of the real world creeping in? I don't know. I don't know how, it's weird that we have Mina who, existing in the same universe as Siri, but maybe that's the whole point. Someone made an AI that fits in with it. There is a one Easter egg where Kenji hums the classic Ultraman theme. He does it mockingly because it's when he's having a fight with his dad. But I thought that was nice. There's also an Easter egg where we find out that Pigmon has a show in universe. It's kind of wacky. It looks like Teletubbies, which makes weird sense if you stop and think about it. But it was nice to see that in there. Let me see. So yeah, another theme is balance in this. So you have family, parenthood, fatherhood, balance, all that. Almost Monsterverse-ish. I thought that's where they were going to go with that, and it wasn't quite exactly like that. It's a little more personal than that. And I did think, as cocky as he was, it was interesting to see how Kenji could be charming as well. He basically turns an interview with Ami into a date, kind of without her noticing. I thought that was pretty clever. They don't fully develop that relationship. I'm guessing that's one of the things that they're going to save for one of those two sequels for later on. We'll see. But, that doesn't get fully fleshed out. But I do think they would be a good match for each other, especially with the experiences that Kenji has had as Ultraman taking care of Emmy. I do think that would help prepare him to be a stepfather for Ami's daughter in this, who at points almost kind of went a little bit Kenny-ish because she's an Ultraman fan in this, and she is weirdly fearless. There's kaiju running around, superhero fights going on, and she's just excited about this. Made me think of Anya from Spy Family. Been watching some Spy Family lately. I was just waiting for her to just start yelling, "So cool!" So it got a little bit strange, but I think it was played more for laughs because you wouldn't necessarily expect most children to react like that, and it fits the tone of the movie. So let me see. Oh yeah, when Emmy, this was another kind of funny Easter egg, but this is stuff that we've seen a lot in Ultraman before, recycling sound effects, noteworthy sound effects. But when Emmy comes out of the cocoon, she has wings and she sounds like Mothra. Okay. Yeah, but it does take, but then I know it's actually not until about 2/3 or so, not 2/3, more like 3/4 of the way into the movie where we finally get the classic Schwatch. Did make us wait a little bit for that, although the kids said it before this, but Ultraman himself doesn't say it until closer to there. And I do love the fact that Ultra Dad has his mustache still on his suit, which is actually a design element in a lot of live action Ultraman, like most notably Ultraman King. He looks like he has a beard. So I thought that was a nice little touch. Let me see. And then, and then at the end we do get the classic rise. Took a little while, but we do get the classic rise. And the swirling intro effects that we saw in most of the show, especially the 60s era Ultra series, that classic swirl. We do see those a couple of times as background images, usually to indicate mood. And a lot of times it's when characters are getting angry. I did note that, I did wonder if there was an homage to the Snyder cut of the Justice League in this, because Dr. Anda's giant mech brings a huge sword down on Ultraman's shoulder that he catches and blocks. Except in this case, it's actually hurting Ultraman, as opposed to when that happened to Superman, when I can't remember the villain's name, where the giant axe comes down on his shoulder and he's just like, huh, just unimpressed. Let me see. Yeah, we'll do it live. Vamp. Let me see. I did joke that, even not joke, but I did write my notes that even though we don't have a traditional Science Patrol team in this, we do have. You can make the argument that Kenji's team, his baseball team, kind of becomes his Science Patrol, because one of the things that is noted is that when he's trying to take care of Emmy, he starts slacking off as a baseball player, and he was supposed to be like the star player, the best player on the team. And then he starts slacking off and it's not working. He's getting angry at umpires and it's not working out very well. But then when he starts getting a handle on things and starts being more self-sacrificial with what he's doing, then you start to see him improving as a player, but not necessarily because we do see him doing better as an individual player, but the major difference that we see is he is coaching the rest of the team to improve them, and that's what helps to turn the team around, after they have a bad middle of the season with him not performing well. So you could say that his team is his Science Patrol, particularly at the end. And then yep, and then that's like most of the important notes that I had going over this. And Jeff and I covered a lot during the live stream. So with this, if any of you have some more comments that you want to put into the chat, I'm going to start going over a few of them, to close things out here. So if you want to throw some more comments into the chat, feel free. So Mojo Rising, the Edwin put in here, and I wish I had shared this one with with Jeff, where Edwin Gonzalez says, "You go, I go, we go," which is from Jeed. This is for the highlights, yeah. And then OmniViewer, he throws in here, "I think every storyteller does that at some point in their careers," referring back to making something that's original. I'm guessing it's the part where we talked about how this project originally started as something original, and then through a series of events was allowed to morph into an actual official Ultraman story. Let me see another comment from Edwin. Yeah, if he gets attached to a sequel, we would be blessed. Talking about Del Toro. I want to see him personally do a Henshin Hero Kamen Rider. I understand where you're coming from with that, Edwin, but I can tell you right now, I think the guy you would probably want for, let's see if we can adjust the camera here a little bit. I think the guy I would prefer to see tackle an American take on Kamen Rider would actually not be Del Toro. I would rather see James Gunn do that, because he's gone on the record of saying that he loves Kamen Rider. And I think Kamen Rider is better suited to his style and sensibilities compared to Del Toro. I want Del Toro to do Ultraman for sure, because he loves monsters and giants and things like that. This is much more up his alley. I know that Del Toro loves Ultraman. I don't know about things like Kamen Rider necessarily. This is a nice comment from OmniViewer. He says, "Ultraman nacho cheese." There you go. Ultraman nacho. Nacho Libre, anybody? Just saying. So Edwin again. "I'm hoping Emiko Sr., when she's reunited with her son, he tries to explain that she's sort of a grandmother, and she thinks he's referring to the reporter. To having a kid with the reporter, maybe. Then she's like, actually, there's a monster." Yeah, that would be. I think that would be a nice piece of humor, if nothing else, in a sequel. Edwin again reminded me of my baby brother to a T. The experience, the noise, and all of it. See, it's just like I said, even if you're not a parent, you can understand what's going on in this movie and the challenges that are faced by taking care of a baby. Because like I said, I'm not a parent yet, but I'm an older brother, so I know at least a little bit about what that is like, as I witnessed a lot of it, and in some cases had to participate. And let me see, Edwin again. Oh, I love that song. Yeah. So, we got another comment here from Edwin. Let me see. "But what season would be a good throw to Gun? I try throwing Kiva, Forze, or or Gaim. I hope I said all of those right. I think the easiest route to go would be with the original because it's going to be the most recognizable for a lot of people, particularly a Japanese audience. And, I think that would still work out very well for the, like I said, for Gun's sensibilities and all that. And I also think that's probably, I could be wrong, that might be the one he's most familiar with. I don't know. It's also one of the ones that's more readily accessible for for people outside of Japan because they can turn on Tubi or Shaft Factory TV and they can watch the original. But Kiva, Forze, and Gaim are not as readily available as other ones. So I think because it's iconic and it's one of the go-tos for people, that would be the one you want to go with. It's like when and I will still defend this movie. Fight me, people. It's when they did the 2017 Power Rangers movie. They went with the original Mighty Morphin characters because those are the ones that people are going to be most familiar with. And that's why the suits, even though they are radically redesigned, they are definitely inspired by those original suits. The Zords, again, despite the fact that they're redesigned, a six-legged mastodon. What madness is this? But, it's still going back to Mighty Morphin. It's something that is most recognizable for people, even though I would love to see movies about some of these other teams and whatnot. But I just think this is most likely what you're going to do. It's like, for most people, it's probably a little different now, but it's like if you ask people, who is Spider-Man, they're probably going to say Peter Parker, because that's the one that's most familiar to them. Now, it's not to diminish Miles Morales, who's been rising in popularity, and largely because of the Spider-Verse movies and things like that. He has been getting pushed a fair amount by Marvel, but for most people, including myself, Peter Parker is always going to be Spider-Man. It's like if you ask, who, well, I don't know if the Flash is necessarily a great example because Wally West did gain a lot of prominence thanks to the Justice League cartoon, but for most people, it's always going to be Barry Allen. So, that's why whenever you see adaptations anymore, it's always Barry Allen. Even when Barry was dead, it was still Barry Allen. I mean, you go back to the 90s show that only ran for one season. Barry had been dead in the comics for about 5-6 years at that point, and they still made the show about Barry Allen. It's because, he's the most iconic of the Flashes, just like I'm saying. If you're going to do a Kamen Rider movie, they're probably going to do Hongo and maybe Hayato in that case. And then you could potentially expand out later if you wanted to, but then, good luck fighting with Toei to make any of that happen, because Toei just loves to say no way. And, that joke will never get old. Just saying. All right. Any more comments? But, before we sign off there, I'm not seeing any. So just to let everyone know, a little bit of housekeeping here in case anyone does want to leave some more comments. Some quick updates on the podcast. I am almost done editing the Pulgasari episode proper with Tommy Trembath. I am also going to that'll get finished. That'll probably be posted up for early access on Patreon. As for, why it hasn't come out as quickly as you would have thought, part of it is, just some normal delay sort of stuff. But I've also, the story segment for this episode is a little bit more ambitious. It's going to have a prologue and an epilogue, which will be posted separately, as has been, my plan for this season, and probably the going forward, what I'm going to do. It's not I don't think everybody necessarily wants to listen to the story segments. Those are for the hardcore fans. But, so it's going to have a prologue episode and then an epilogue. So I've got to get some recording done for that and get that edited, and editing story segments, even though they're substantially shorter than a regular podcast episode, they take about as long to edit because they require much more meticulous, they have more meticulous detail, require more meticulous effort to get put together compared to a normal podcast episode. So that's been a little bit part of that. But I do have that. The Pulgasar episode has been recorded. The Zillow Beast episode has been recorded, which should hopefully be out soon. And I have also recorded the annual Harryhausen crossover with Elijah Thomas. This year it will be over Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So it was all been recorded. I will tell you right now, because the Harryhausen episode has a very hard deadline, which is June 29th, Harryhausen's birthday, and also me and Elijah's birthday, mine and Elijah's birthday, whatever. So, so that has a hard deadline. So that may end up coming out before the Zillow Beast episode. We'll see. I'm also going to do my darndest to try to get the first mainline episode for July, which will be The Lake. I want to try to get that out on time because that'll be right before G-Fest. And I want to be able to, say like, hey, look, here's a new episode that just came out right before G-Fest. So I'm working on that. But speaking of that, and I do plan on putting this audio out probably on the Henshin Men feed just because it would be relevant to those listeners. But I'm also planning on obviously launching Henshin Power V3, which I mentioned a little bit at the beginning of this episode. That will start on Ultraman Day with my friends Christopher Riner and Jake Hambrick. We will be kicking off that show. Well, the first episode will just be an introductory episode, just laying the groundwork for everything, explaining the format and all that fun stuff. But the discussion episodes will start the week after that with Kamen Rider V3, which was an inspiration for the title. And since Henshin Men was done with the original Kamen Rider for the most part, it felt natural to jump to the next series in the canon with Kamen Rider V3. And we've already recorded a few episodes for that, and we'll be putting those out a couple times a month, twice a month, just like the Film Vault. And the other thing I'm going to let everybody know about now, so you can kind of prepare yourself. So definitely check the show notes for this. But we will be doing we're starting with V3. We will make our selections for what we're going to do after V3, and you get to determine the order that we cover those series. Because I'm going to include it with the first episode will be a week-long, I'm thinking it'll probably be a Google poll where you can go in and and pick between the three selections from your three hosts about what we cover next after Kamen Rider V3. And whatever order that poll comes out, that will be the order in which we cover those three series, and then we'll start the cycle all over again after we get through those four. So definitely be looking out for that, because you can actually determine what happens next. So if there's one of those particular series you're like, I want you to cover it now, make your voice known, put in your vote for it. All right. And with that, I think I've got all the important stuff covered. I don't see any new comments in there. If you want to say something, do it fast and I will get to it, and I will try to get to it. But otherwise, this has been great. Once again, thank you, Jeff Gomez, for taking time out of your day to come talk to me about Ultraman Rising. And thank you, kaiju lovers, heroes of the internet, whichever moniker you prefer, for watching live and leaving your comments. Oh, we got one more here from Edwin. Let me see. Any hint for the series on the poll? The options? I would say what they are, but I don't want to give anything away before the episode drops, because we had a little bit of fun trying to drag it out, making it a little bit suspenseful. I'll so I won't tell you what they are. I will drop I'll give you a couple of hints. One of them is not live action, and two of them are major Henshin hero franchises. That's all I'm going to say for now. So if you want some more concrete details, Edwin, maybe in a private conversation, but I will swear you to secrecy. And if you start to blabbing it around to people, well, you saw what happened to poor Gigantron in this movie. I'm just saying. All right. And with that, sayonara. I'll see you in the next episode.